So I'm Tyler. I'm going to be covering RLN, stands for Rate Limiting Nullifier. There's a couple people in this room that have actually worked on it. Owner, Oscar, I'm going to call you guys out. If you want to follow along the slides, there's a QR code. All right, so essentially the point of RLN is to prevent denial of service attacks or spam attacks in anonymous environments. So like you can kind of get away with not having this in like a centralized system because you can track users in other ways like IP addresses, but in like a peer-to-peer environment or any other non-centralized environment, then you would probably need this. Like anywhere that semaphore is being used and the proof is being generated by the user, like you should probably consider using RLN to prevent spam attacks. All right, so the structure of how this whole thing is going to go is basically I'm going to go through the building blocks of how RLN works and how we've kind of added to it over time, and then the challenges we're kind of facing right now. All right, so there's a couple like simple steps to make RLN work. So the first one is basically proving you're in a group while not revealing who you are, which is basically semaphore. Then you create a share for Shamir secret sharing that is unique to the user, the epoch, and the message, and whatever your rate limit is, which is the message ID in this case. And then you also compute an internal nullifier, which basically is like a unique hash where anytime a user signals, it'll be a unique internal nullifier unless they break the rate limit, and then it will match. And that's essentially how you figure out that one user has messaged more than they're supposed to. You can match those together, combine the shares, and then you can reveal their secret and withdraw their stake. Semaphore is basically just a Merkle tree where your leaf node is just your secret hashed. So essentially, like if you break the rate limit, then someone else can recover your secret, prove that they know something that hashes to one of the leaves on the tree, and then they can remove you from the tree. And the internal nullifier, so we've kind of changed this a little bit on like how it worked originally. Originally, you would pass in the RLN app identifier and an epoch. So the epoch is just any time or like event that you want to make your rate limit apply to. And then the RLN app identifier is basically just to make sure that there's no collisions between different applications or semaphore groups or anything like that. And yeah, so the internal nullifier is generated from the app identifier, the epoch hashed together, and then the external nullifier and the secret hashed together twice, which the first time is passed to other parts of the circuit, which we'll see in a minute. Any questions here? Okay. All right, and then the Shamir secret sharing part. So this A1 here is the intermediate step of the internal nullifier. So essentially, the goal of this is to create a unique share to the user, the epoch, the message ID, so on and so forth. And yeah, so we're basically using the external nullifier multiplied with the hash to get some random point out in space that's unique to the message and the time, right? Or whatever rate limiting thing you want to use, and then you're offsetting that by your secret. So if someone can gather 2 points, then they can reconstruct your secret wherever your that line crosses Y. That's where your secret is. So this is basically the external nullifier identifies some point in space, and then your message is what generates the other point in space, right? So the share one is actually what's shared and generated from the proof. That point derived from epoch is unique to the user, so other users won't be able to determine what that is unless you know the secret. And yeah, so if you gather 2 shares, then you can reconstruct the secret. So with this way, you can only do at most one message per epoch, right? In order to get more messages per epoch, if you want more flexibility, you have to make a more complicated, a higher degree polynomial, right? This makes circuits a pain. So we found a way around this, and we are essentially adding in a limit. So like a user can have some max limit, right? And then they basically just create an internal nullifier using some value between 0 and their message limit, right? And as long as that's unique, then they're fine, right? So they can do 10 messages, per epoch or whatever, and it's not a problem. And we have two kind of implementations of this. One where every user has the same limit, which this message limit is a public input to the circuit then. We also have another version where it's a private input, and when you commit so instead of just hashing your secret to the Merkle tree for the member list, you would hash together your secret and your message limit to create some unique thing that's like basically checkable so you can still prove that you're in the group with semaphore, right? Does anyone have any questions there?
So which are the limits sequence-wise for this kind of degree of polynomials on which you are using to split your shares? Like, is it like a bound that you find that at some point the proving time is just insane, or like what's the issue?
So it's about like flexibility, right? So like if you want to rate limit one message per second, that's fine, right? If you want to do 65,000 messages per day, that's getting insane, right? So it's really we're trying to give flexibility to developers. Where like we've had a couple requests for multiple rate limits per epoch. So like you could have a day rate limit and an hour rate limit and a minute rate limit, and then have different values for those, and then also bound them in some sane way. You can have 60 messages per hour, and then thousands per day or whatever. So it can get pretty complex. Yes. Sorry, can you say that again? No, it's not that bad.
So the problem is like some adversary they can just generate random message. So if the verifier is very expensive, it's going to
Right. Yeah. So that is kind of one of our upper or lower limits. Is we also want to prevent someone spamming the server with proofs to try to DDoS them also, right? I think at that point we would probably rate limit them at like an IP level or networking level. These proofs are relatively fast to verify, but like that is definitely an attack vector. So, yeah.
Which kind of order of the circuit are we speaking about? Like 2 to the what constraint?
It's like 5,500 constraints, so it's pretty small. Proving time's pretty quick. Yeah.
Just a comment on questions. So like in an anonymous peer-to-peer network, at least, what's good about audience is you can prove really bad behavior. Like so, if someone sends a proof and it's not valid, you can prove that that's like an invalid operation, and you can complement that with, for example, traditional peer scoring, like in custom stuff. So that way you can prove that there's no problem. So audience kind of you got the best in depth, but it's similar to Ethereum, for example, where you can prove it like messages are correct enough. So you can have the same with the anonymous network. So it works out all right. It's not that big of an attack.
Yeah, exactly. So this is very useful in peer-to-peer networks where a message can be amplified, right? So if you send an invalid message to 8 of your peers or whatever, and they all drop the message, it's fine, whatever. It's obnoxious, but it's fine. The problem really is like when you have one anonymous user that's spamming a network and it gets amplified throughout thousands and thousands of peers. Like that's pretty obnoxious. So yeah. All right. Anyone have questions on this before I move on? All right. All right, and then this is essentially the whole circuit, how it all kind of fits together. So on the left side, we have the internal nullifier. The middle, we have Shamir secret sharing, and then on the right side, we have semaphore and then the range check for message limits. There's obviously a little bit more than this in the actual circuit, but this is a good visualization for now. All right, and then so I kind of already covered this, but so the circuit where all the users have the same rate limit, that's just a public input, and then for the different circuit, it becomes part of your ID commitment when you actually register. All right, so basically how this is used practically is, you have some contract on chain or you have some other like registry mechanism where you put down stake, whether that's like money or like your Twitter account or, something else. And then you send messages. If you send too many messages, then someone else can reconstruct your secret and remove your stake, remove you from the system. All right. And then, building blocks. So we have kind of constructed this JavaScript library, RLNJS, which is still a lot in the works. Things are changing, but the rough idea of how it works is you have some instance that handles your actual identity and generates proofs for you, and has some utility functions like being able to manually recover someone else's secret. Then we have a registry that basically would mirror whatever's on chain, so you can track and check things quicker without having to actually query a node. And that also generates all the Merkle tree witness stuff for generating proofs. And then we have a cache, which basically tracks, the last X number of epochs. It'll track all the messages and look for internal nullifiers that match. And if it finds any, then it will automatically recover the secret for you and alert you that there's been some breach. Questions here? What's up?
So I know that there's more than one RLN implementation, so there's in different languages, or at least I know that one, for example, also exists in Go, and there's code for RLN in Rust also, I think. Do all of them follow this kind of structure or architecture? Is there different things
So that's actually a question for you. You want to pass Oscar the mic?
So we used to be like a Rust native implementation as well, but I think by owner on that built on Velma. But then we have an implementation of Webtool in Rust, but it's using the serverless and Ox.com. So the servers are the same, and then the API is very similar to this, but then in addition to that, there's also some helper stuff that's related to peer-to-peer networks, because there's additional state you need to track off, and you're also doing verification locally on a node-to-node basis. It's slightly different, but the general API is the same. But we obviously use the same servers, so server-based, and then apply in Rust, and that way you can use different runtimes like Go, Nim, Rust, whatever.
Yeah, so this is so they for Waku, they have a specific use case, right? For this, we're just trying to make it generic to get adoption. So the contract, you stake some ERC20 token. It's got a mechanism for slashing and allows the user to withdraw their own stake. There's some complexities to this, which I'll get into in a minute. But before then, I will do a quick demo. All right, so you have a user on the left, user on the right, and they're, assume they are connected in some peer-to-peer network. You can generate and send a message. So this person sent a message, user 2 sends a message, and then we increment the epoch. They can send a new message, right? So this is assuming one message per epoch, right? If you try to send the same message, then it'll just say proof already exists. Like that's handled at the networking level. Yep. Yeah. Right. That's great. Yeah. It's basically not noticeable. Like, you could really, with async calls, you can just make it magicked away in the background, and it's fine.
What is the depth of the Merkle? What is the depth of the Merkle tree of the proof that you are generating?
20. Yeah.
So enough for like a large chat room.
Yeah. I forgot what actual order that is, but it's a lot of people. Like it's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah. And really, I mean, changing the tree depth actually doesn't affect it that much. Like, I mean, some decent percentage. Like even if it doubles, it's still reasonable. So yeah, all right. So let's say if someone breaks the rate limit, right? So we're gonna modify this message, and I haven't changed the epoch. They're gonna send it, and then we realize that there's a breach. It recovers the secret, shows the actual member ID, and then now both of these registries have slashed that user and moved them into the slash registry. And you can see at the bottom like all the messages we published. Any questions here?
Yeah. And you have to recover the secret because then you can invalidate them in further epochs with the message.
Yeah. So if you, right. So the whole idea is like if you can recover someone else's secret and you can prove that, then you can take their stake, whatever that is, right? It's money or whatever, and then move them basically from one Merkle tree to another. So zero out their identity commitment in the registry, and then move them to some slash registry so they can't re-sign up with that ID commitment. Cool? All right, so this is the fun part, the challenges we're coming up with. So front running is a fun problem. So for a user to prove to the contract that they know somebody's secret, they have to reveal that in some way, right? Or like make some proof that they know that, right? There's a couple challenges with this. So you have the simple, just put that in the actual call to the contract, and then someone else can front run you. It's super easy, but it's also a super simple transaction. You could generate a proof, right? But then you're increasing gas costs and complexity. There's other circuits we have to deal with. It's just less fun. It's less good UX, right? And then there's the time lock mechanism. So you could prove, you could basically say that, I want to call out this ID commitment, and here's the ID commitment plus my address hashed, or the secret and the address hashed, and then you can, submit that to a contract, time lock it for, X number of hours or blocks or whatever, and then make another transaction later with the actual secret to prove that you know what it is. But that's not great UX either. So we're trying to find a better solution, or maybe just implement all of these and then let devs choose whichever one they want. If anyone else has any other ideas, definitely down to hear them, because we've talked about this a fair bit, and yeah.
So we will need to handle money-related inside a circuit, because if we are using ROP16, for example, ROP16 is known for money-related issue. So you can, for example, generate a proof for a new message that maybe we will share.
So there is a potential algebraic attack with Poseidon. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just, for example, Zcash handle money-related using some form of encryption. And I don't really see something encrypted inside the circuit. So.
Yeah, there's nothing encrypted in it. Yeah, I mean, the vulnerabilities that we're aware of, they are not feasible. I mean, you would need all the computing on the planet times 1,000 or something. Like it's not super feasible right now. But that is something we're working on. But it's mainly because of the Poseidon hash function. So at any point, we could swap that out. Yeah. All right. So our other problem is money laundering, right? So if you can deposit some amount of money into a contract and then take it out from a different address by slashing that user, because you obviously know the secret because it's you, well, we essentially have Tornado Cash, right? So we want to try to avoid this, and this isn't fun either. So our idea is basically if you try to withdraw from the same address that you deposited from, then cool, no problem. If you try to do it from a different address, we want to charge some fee, right? So like say 10% or whatever, right? That is still not great because
It's an acceptable money laundering tax.
right. So like I mean like 10%, right? That's not that much, right? So what do you do with that money, right? So if we're talking about ERC20s, if you burn it and it's USDC, then Circle gets that money essentially, right? It's like removed on chain, and they can just take that out of their out of one bank account, put it in another, right? We can donate it. And that's not really neutral. Like, who do we give that money to, right? There's all kinds of problems there. And then, like, okay, we could gamify it some and make a lottery, just like give it to some random user that's deposited money. But then we have to deal with like Chainlink for randomness, like we have to fund that, and like there's just all kinds of other issues. So yeah, if anyone has any good ideas for this, also. Would be great to hear it. So you have a question?
Yeah, not a great idea, a question. In the previous slide.
This one?
Yeah. So you say don't deploy RLN contracts officially,
Mm-hmm.
but if you have the same API, like it shouldn't be super difficult to basically see that an RLN contract has been deployed somewhere. Right?
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, I think it depends where it's used, but for example, in general, I think it's useful in scenarios where spam is very bad in the system, right? For example, for validated nodes in some consensus network, whatever, like in these cases, it would make sense to run E, for example. And similarly, in other types of networks where you have kind of relays, and the same thing, kind of chat applications, if it's a token, that would be called economics, so that kind of makes sense. And then I think the lottery is not terrible either, especially if you distribute it to people who want to register. So I think at least that's the direction we were thinking about it. I think that seems doable.
Yeah.
But,
I like the lottery idea. It's just like generating randomness is like
You still need an incentive for the slashing though. So like 10% needs to go to the person that submits the message. Like in the case where you have to pay for the slashing message, where you calculated their secret and you need to reveal it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like
Right.
like 100% lottery would not incentivize the slasher.
Yeah. Right. So yeah. So the idea is like if I slash you, right, I get 90% of your stake that you put down, but there is some fee, right, some 10% fee or whatever, to try to mitigate money laundering, right? The question is like, where does that fee go, right? Like the simple naive answer is just like, well, burn it, right? That's not always the best case, right? Lottery is more fun, but adds more complexity and like, yeah.
You say like 10% is like a tax, so perhaps it should be bigger, no? Like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
perhaps there can be like the slasher get only 10% and the 90% goes for the other.
Right. So this really depends on like how much the stake is and like the general use case, right? It's like if the stake is $10 and they get 10% of that, like that's not even worth the transaction fees, honestly, right? But there's not a lot of cases where you would have thousands and thousands of people that sign up for something that has like a stake of like $100 or $1,000 to really like make that worth it, right? So it's like this, whatever percentage fee really should be based on whatever the gas fees are and that stake level for whatever you're trying to do. So like you're trying to like thread the gap on like avoiding money laundering and making it worth it to still slash someone. Yeah.
This is a common problem. I think like
Yeah.
259 is they're trying to prevent pollution so they burn. But I think like there's also a similar problem with like net smoothing. Like we want to prevent reorgs and the incentive to reorg when there's
Right.
a 500 ETH block. So we smooth it, right? I don't know if there's like a smoothing mechanism here where like all slashers get a pool.
Who is a slasher if everyone's anonymous? Like that's the problem. It's
Yeah.
like,
Well, you have to incentivize the slasher, disincentivize the money launderer.
right.
Maybe time locks, smoothing, and a small fee, like a burn, and the random lottery altogether would doesn't help anybody too much, but severely punishes the money
Right.
launderer.
But now you have really complex contracts
Yeah.
and higher gas fees just to slash it all, right?
In the case of like the off-chain RL in here, where I'm just like an anonymous chat room, like if anybody used to use Yik Yak before it disappeared, where you could like your whole university could like basically anonymously upvote, downvote, like yells, like posts, like
Yeah,
tweets.
yeah.
This would be perfect because all you have
Right.
to do is like the secret, basically like the slashing here is not like an economic slashing. It's like you can't participate for 48 hours because he's spam.
Yeah.
It's more like a normal chat room is spam, anti-spam.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So like you could use like ZK JWTs to like prove that you have some email address or whatever, right? And then use that as your stake. Yeah. There's a lot of ways to do this, but yeah, for the economic side, on the on-chain side, it's messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to ask a dumb question, like, are you mainly concerned with legal consequences or misuse? Because I mean, if you're concerned about misuse, this is not relevant.
It's trying to mitigate it somewhat, right? Like it's not going to prevent it.
It's like covering the back of developers so that if somebody comes to persecute them, they say, okay, we did all we could, but I mean, it's not going to stop this directly.
Yeah.
So it's here for the legal consequences.
Yeah, it's right. Trying to disincentivize money laundering. I mean, it's impossible to stop it, right? Like, it's, you know.
But you can force them to use something else. So like,
Yeah.
if it's cheaper for me to mint an NFT and then like sell it to my uncivil self and not pay 10%, then the money launderers will go somewhere else and the regulators will go
Exactly.
somewhere else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. The goal is to fly under the radar of OFAC, essentially. It's like, so let's say, like, I would like to deploy this as PFC at some point, and have that be the registry for a bunch of our applications, right? I don't want that heat on us, right? I would like to avoid that. But also for other applications, if they want to deploy it, like they should have some general guidelines on, what is a sane way to approach this,
Just mapping it back to kind of the Web 2 world, like one way to think about it is kind of as a platform permission fee, so similar to like Airbnb or Google or whatever, where you have some set fee for like the market connector, and that's kind of where the network effects are. So it depends a lot on where you are deploying it. If it's a social network that has token, or if it's like some, like say, ETH and validators, then it makes sense that that's kind of the network, and it's like a platform fee, and in this case, all the Ethereum holders. But I think that's a good mental model to use. Platform and marketplace, and it also sort of needs, like, it's more of a different spin. It helps solve the sort of money laundering and stuff, but it's like it's a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
It can be useful.
Cool. That's it. And I went a minute over.
Any more questions for Tyler?
Consumption of understanding the framework and why did we don't use time and use like the symbols and more to evaluate the years.
So this essentially adds the stake, the financial incentive behind it. So yeah, it's like it's not that much more complicated.
I think we're assuming like the peer would want the fundamental program to write faithfully. So like if let's say we write it, peer should send only twice the messages, but the peer sends the third, then it reveals the secret. But the peer can they can present like using the old nullifier, they don't have to use the new nullifier to reveal their secret.
So they can't use an old nullifier in this case because it's tied to the message and the epoch.
Oh. Oh. Okay.
The way I see like the epoch is like a timed nonce.
Hmm?
No, the way I see like the epoch is like a timed nonce.
Yeah. It could also be like an election. It could be, some poll. It could be, whatever you want. But yeah, some timestamp is usually the idea behind it. Yeah.
I didn't quite understand the construction about like that you can specify the amount of messages per epoch.
Mm.
You said that's a private input, and you do it at the commitment phase or when I join the group. Is that something that each person can decide how many messages they can submit at an epoch, or how is that?
Yeah, so like in the contract, we would have like multiple Merkle trees, multiple registries. So you could have like a 10 USDC one that allows, one message per 10 minutes, and then 100 USDC for, 5 messages per 10 minutes or whatever. Yeah, you basically just have different levels, right? And then there are some constructions we've talked about where like this could be used where there's so everyone has the same rate limit per small time, but then different rate limits for larger time periods. So you can post one message every 10 minutes, but only 20 messages a day, and then someone else can post 10,000 a day or whatever. Like, yeah. So yeah, we're working on trying to figure out, well, we're working with someone else actually that's outside of our group that has some pretty interesting ideas and use cases for this. So we're trying to make this more flexible on how many messages you can do in X given time and yeah, make it really versatile. So, yeah.
All right. So if we assume that we create shares for the private key of the account that we're using, let's say that we're on Ethereum, right? And not only that, but we also limit the participants to kind of have, I don't know, at least 100 transactions on mainnet or at least 1,000 transactions on mainnet, so that you can somehow prove that this is an account that you really use over the time. Wouldn't it be worth to just, if the shares allow you to basically get the secret key of the account that is staking or whatever, doesn't this prevent money laundering directly on a much better way? Because like you are just taking the risk that your secret key would be leaked everywhere, hence a lot of people will try to basically get your stake as soon as possible.
Yeah, so the secret in this case, in this construction, is just some random number that you're committing to, right? It's not necessarily your secret key for your actual wallet. Yeah.
But it wouldn't be difficult to prove that, so you have a hard time proving that the actual number that you are doing the secret sharing for is actually the secret key that leads to the public key that is inside of the tree. Is that the case?
No, so that's the problem that Semaphore solves, right? So like Semaphore is you put in a Merkle tree and then you put in some secret and you're proving that you know some value that hashes to one of the leaves. And then the Merkle root pops out the other end, and then when that proof goes out and it's verified by someone else, they verify that Merkle root with the Merkle root that's on chain or whatever. Like we'll have some rolling time period of Merkle root. So it's like the Merkle root for this epoch is this, right? So you can double check that they're actually using the right tree, and semaphore is basically just proving that you're in some Merkle tree. Yeah.
Just to finish, how easy is to add conditions in order to participate in the Merkle tree, such as you need to own an ENS, or you need to, I don't know, something that basically kind of ties you more to the.
So we're looking at that as like a higher level thing, right? So like that's more of like an app developer that would use this would determine who can join their registry, right? They would be the filter. Yeah, we're not doing that. We're just making the construction to make all of this work. Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks, Doug.
All right. Thank you.